Thank you, Gail. Good morning, happy faces. Well, I want to begin by thanking a UU minister named Lynn Unger. Her reflection on our UUA website was my inspiration, and I have used parts of her writing woven into mine to tell my story today because I have hope, but we all need inspiration. I am 63 years old, but you wouldn't know by how many times John rolls his eyes at me every day. On most days, I have the mental discipline of a 9-year-old boy, always with the jokes. I think John has even asked Lorraine to keep me in check during church, y'all. Years ago, I worked with a man named Sonny, and I heard him and another coworker named Errol talking about my fast tongue, and Sonny quickly added, "Yeah, and the damn thing's sharp, too." So yes, I like to live my life happy and joyful, funny and unrestrained. But what does Christmas mean to me this year? Growing up, my family wasn't the ones on the front pew or the back pew for that matter for Christmas, Easter, or any other day. Heck, I don't ever remember any talk of Christmas being about a baby other than when the songs like Away in a Manger would come on the radio. Growing up in Central Florida, we didn't have the snowmen and those kinds of festivities. Our holiday season usually kicked off around the television. It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, soon followed by Frosty the Snowman and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. We gathered as a family to sit and watch these classics. You know, back then, it was our only opportunity. We didn't have streaming services or DVRs or even VCRs. If you missed it, you missed it. But then it was time to put up the tree. We did this as a family, and most years I remember an artificial tree, and I remember it well, all white as if covered with snow in Florida. We all had our favorite ornaments, and I don't specifically remember, but I'm pretty sure me and my brother Donnie would argue over them. Our house on Christmas Eve was pure bedlam. Our entire family would gather at our house, and the women would prepare a meal, and afterward we would exchange our gifts. Parents, grandparents, cousins, aunts, and uncles, all joyous in watching each other open presents. My goofy father would be modeling his new boxer underwear, or me modeling something my aunt gave me. One year, when I was very young, my father bought my granddaddy, his father, a belt. He wrapped it inside a small box, but he placed that in the bottom of a large 3-foot by 3-foot box. But he had a stale biscuit with bacon inside wrapped and placed higher in the box. And Granddaddy was a little bit tipsy that year. He began to cry and eat the stale biscuit, but of course, he was mad when he got the joke. Me and my siblings never had to wait until Christmas morning for Santa Claus. My father couldn't wait that long, or maybe he just wanted to sleep in. But for years, he and the other adults would make like they heard a noise outside, then insist we had to go hide in our rooms because it must be Santa. And you know, you can never see Santa. And as happens with age and experience, that all changes. We all get to become anew as adults at Christmas time. My very first adult Christmas away from home was with a man named Richard. Sorry. We were in Groton, Connecticut. He was stationed on a submarine but had his own apartment. I was 18 and just having left home for the first time was beginning my submarine training. I just remember it being freezing cold, us huddled on the couch under blankets watching movies, and he cooked for me a capon. I'd never heard of a capon before, and in case you don't know, look it up because we have vegans in the congregation. But that was the first time I remember a man cooking inside. The men in my family back then only grilled. Cooking was woman work. And Richard lives in Virginia Beach, and he and I are still friends to this day. But I've had many holidays away from my family, especially during the Navy years. Living in Hawaii as a young sailor, I could not afford to travel back to Florida. But I have some great memories, though. Luau's on the beach or cabana parties in the backyard with friends. I gotta admit, I didn't miss the snow and cold I had been exposed to the year before in Groton. Having graduated at the top of my class, I had first choice of my assignment, and I'm sure living in Connecticut for a year played into my decision of Hawaii. But one year, I was working in Virginia Beach, and I snuck home, and I surprised my parents. I had surreptitiously planned a photo shoot with my siblings. We wanted to give them a photo gift that Christmas, and I'm so glad we did. Several years later, just a few days after Christmas, my brother Donnie died. It was the last photo we all had together. John and I have it on our hall photo wall. My first Christmas after leaving the Navy was a special story of love and the love that I have for my sister. I had begun working for Lockheed, and for the first time in my life, as an adult out on my own, I actually had money. Money. I found myself alone in New York City, and I hadn't been there in decades, and I'd never been there at Christmas. It was magical and beautiful, the snow and the store window displays, the frenzied pace of the city. Everything seemed to be happening so fast, but I joined right in. Let me tell you, I shopped. A favorite day was shopping for my sister Daphne, who most of you have met. She was an executive, a single mother with 3 young daughters, so naturally I had to buy her clothes. So here I am in a woman's store on Fifth Avenue and realize I had no idea the sizes or what to get. This was way before cell phones, and long story short, I take the women's clothes, it was a linen pantsuit, into the dressing room and try them on myself. I had guessed we were about the same size, with her a bit smaller, but we were both pretty tiny. I figured if it was snug on me, then it would fit her. The women in the store said what a good brother I was. I think she still owns the suit, and she also thinks I'm a pretty great brother. There were many times over the years when I would swoop in and become my Christmas persona of Uncle Elf. I'm still called this by our adult kids, and I have been in so many countries and cultures during the Christmas holidays. I would bring presents from all these foreign places, and I was the cool uncle. There were also many years that I would gather with my sister to help her create the best experience possible for her 3 girls, my 3 girls. We would shop all week, then on Christmas Eve during the family madness, I would sneak away and hang new pajamas at their house. I signed their presents from Uncle Elf. Those were great times back when Mom and Dad were still alive, and I loved being that Uncle Elf. But he had to retire because them kids kept breeding like rabbits, and I can't afford them all anymore. Christmas of 1991, I was working in Jubail in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and there was no Christmas, mostly no Christmas. I lived in a beach house with an alcoholic coworker, and by Christmas I could barely speak to the man. You see, back before our traditional Thanksgiving, I had spent a week shopping for items to prepare a meal for all my coworkers and other Americans that wanted to join in. Of course, while prepping all this, I'm in the kitchen and the men folk are in the living room talking about the fag, the chef. That's what they called me from then on, the chef with a wink in their eye. So here I was, stranded in a country that had no entertainment. Back then, there was no TV or radio except Muslim religious stuff over the air from the city of Riyadh. The town of Jubail had a single traffic light, a small grocer, a KFC, and a Thai restaurant. Now, I have a saying that all of my kids know, and it's, I refuse to get sucked into the abyss of mire and doom. I could not let those guys win. So I befriended the help, the men from Bangladesh, so far from their own families, and these men had never experienced an American that really wanted to know them. I also spent many afternoons with Baya, the Greek woman that was married to the Saudi who owned the compound we lived in. She taught me to make the most delicious roasted redfish. She told me her story of landing in America and watching television for months to learn English. As Christmas approached, she said she needed to ask me a secret question. She was having a Christmas party in the beach cabana house. Now, mind you, to even say Christmas was anathema to spewing poison back then. But the housing compound catered to the expat community and no locals lived there. However, I had been thrown out of a stationery store downtown for wishing another American a happy Christmas, as the Muslim store owner yelled that this was a good Muslim store and you need to leave. Back then, the Mutawa, or religious police, had dominant power, and especially in this small town on the Arabian Sea. They were terrifying, strutting around carrying assault rifles. I watched them cane people in the streets, or worse. There was a mass beheading during my stay. But Baya was having this party and said that someone was giving her a ham. A ham in the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. That was the secret, because pork isn't allowed in the kingdom, and still to this day, you cannot have pork in that country, but somehow it was to appear, and she needed my help to cook it. I once again gathered all the ingredients, driving all the way to Dhahran to visit the American Safeway. The day arrives, and she calls me over there, and on the counter in the kitchen is a pound of bacon. We laughed when she discovered that her translation from Arabic to Greek to English had gone askew. Later that night, I would be glad there was no ham. The Mutawa knocked at the compound gate, wanting to search the premises. Luckily, the owner, Abdullah, was in town and didn't let them in, but we could have eaten a pound of bacon pretty quickly if we had to, but an entire ham, probably not so much. One year, I was working in Seattle, Washington, and I was installing an upgrade to a radar on a Coast Guard cutter. And the job was supposed to take 5 days, but things didn't go well. It was getting close to Christmas, and I wasn't back home in Alabama yet. But I was staying in the Crown Plaza downtown Seattle, which wasn't shabby, but I kept having to request another day and another day. just knowing that the literal truckload of gifts I had in Alabama to take to Florida from Uncle Elf would not make it by Christmas Eve. That Friday morning, I stopped at the front desk again to request another 2 days. It was a super busy time with conventions and Christmas parties, but the front desk staff knew me and promised if I had my bags packed, they would make sure my belongings would be in a room that evening. And boy, were they. The front desk wouldn't give me the key to my room, but insisted the bellman escort me to my room. We got on the elevator and he pushed the button for the penthouse. He opened the door and bam, I'm looking off into the distance, into the Space Needle. The view was unbelievable. It was like something from the movies or where a movie stars reside. There was a dining room table for 8 people, 3 bedrooms with en suites, and it was the fanciest room I had ever been in. Too bad those new dating apps weren't available back then. There probably would have been a party. But in the end, I came screeching in at the Huntsville airport on December 23rd, making it to Florida after driving all night to make the festivities. In the year 2000, I was in Kaohsiung, Taiwan on a work assignment. It's another one I will never forget for a few reasons. Of course, the obvious crap show around the Bush-Gore election. Watching all of that unfold remotely was so disheartening, compounded by the fact that I worked with a bunch of homophobic guys that were cheering it on. However, I had an excellent trip home through Hong Kong. Back then, we had a corporate travel agent that booked all our trips. She had booked me a room at the Sheraton. What I didn't know was that I would be picked up at the airport and driven to the hotel in their chauffeured Rolls Royce. I shopped at all the markets by day, and someone was watching over me too because I forgot about them driving on the opposite side of the road and stepped out in front of a car. Luckily, a man pulled me back onto the sidewalk just before being ran over. But then, after dark, the most amazing thing happens over Victoria Harbor. If you've never seen the light show on the buildings over Victoria Harbor, I suggest you Google it. All of these buildings had Christmas scenes, and we're talking 20-story buildings, one after another, after another, after another. It was really jaw-dropping to see, especially in a country that doesn't have a large Christian base. I'm not sure if it still takes place. The last time I was there was just a few years after the transfer of power. I don't know if China still allows this to happen, but it will always remain one of my favorite holiday experiences, but I had no idea it existed until I was just passing through. As you've all known, John is a big bridge player. Every year, his club has a Christmas or holiday gathering, and it's been lovely to attend. It's really just a potluck and standing around yammering with friends you see weekly, but rarely talk with, because after all, you cannot talk while you're playing bridge. Anyway, we have a ways to drive, and I want my baked brie cheese with cranberries, orange, and roasted pecans to be perfect. Then I get in and realize there are 5 other baked cheeses already on the table. I felt like Ralphie from A Christmas Story with his decoder ring hiding in the bathroom. It was like bringing deviled eggs to a person who owns chickens. I wonder how many of you know the story of the Christmas truce. During World War I in December of 1914, the British and the Germans were battling along a 500-mile stretch. On Christmas Eve of 1914, soldiers on both sides opened their packages. They were hunkered down in the cold, muddy trenches and wished they were home again. They began singing carols when something extraordinary happened. A soldier began to sing Silent Night in German, or perhaps O Come All Ye Faithful in English. But then the soldiers on the other side joined in. The songs of the two armies, even though in different languages, blended together in the night. Then a German soldier came out from his trench, and he knew it was fraught with danger, but no one fired. He had a sign that said, "Merry Christmas. We not shoot, you not shoot." Shortly after, a British soldier made his way into the open area between the fighting forces, then another and another. And soon all the soldiers had climbed out and were greeting one another, enemy greeting enemy in the middle of no man's land. Officers tried in vain to forbid this from happening, but filled with the Christmas spirit of peace and goodwill, they shared items like candies, and they swapped buttons from their uniforms, and they showed each other pictures of families, and someone even started a soccer game. The unplanned Christmas truce happened all along the 500-mile battlefront. Whether it lasted for a few hours or a few days, I don't really know, but each man paused as he learned that the enemy was a human being like himself. For a short time, happiness and joy reigned. The spirit of love and compassion ruled supreme even in the midst of the battlefield. Us Americans, and especially us UUs, have all been through a rough season or two. There is no way that 100% of us are happy. So I am looking for all the happy memories I can muster. I'm seeking solace in whatever I can find. Reverend Lynn Unger describes how she, as a Jewish UU, is trying to get into the spirit of Christmas back in 2017. She said the jingle bells and presents under the tree aren't doing it for her. She goes on to describe that she would like to feel in spirit like the three wise men who trusted that there was something out there, although they didn't know exactly what, that was worth looking for. Men who didn't really get that this was a totally different kind of king who brought presents fit for the kind of king they understood: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. However, they didn't walk off in disgust and bewilderment when what they had sought for so long turned out to be a baby with the kind of power that babies have and not the power of kings. I don't know that I will get there, she says, but what I'm really hoping for, what I am aiming toward, is the Christmas spirit of the shepherds, who have always been her favorite part of the story. I mean, really, here are ordinary guys doing the most ordinary things, just out on the job, keeping an eye on what needs to be watched. And Luke tells us in the Bible that suddenly the sky was full of angels. They were terrified, and who wouldn't be? Any reasonable person would conclude that the sky was falling and hunker down. But these guys, these plain, extraordinary guys, get their sheep together and go out to look for a baby wrapped in swaddling clothes. Today, it's like saying, you will know for a sign when you see a baby in a onesie. As I get older, it is getting more difficult for me to get into a holiday spirit. I'm more Santa than Immaculate Conception. I'm way more A Christmas Story than It's a Wonderful Life. For sure, more pagan than Christian. I do believe there was a man named Jesus that walked this earth and spread his messages of transformative love for all that we see. I even think he deserves the adoration bestowed upon him. His message was unadulterated and kind, loving and generous. What many do not know is that Muslims also revere Jesus as a prophet. Their tenets align in so many ways with the Western Christian belief, but put simply, they just think that so many had strayed from the teachings of God that Muhammad was instructed by Allah to correct the wrongs and put them back on track to holiness. But as we know, Christmas is seen around the world as the celebration of the birth of Jesus of Nazareth. There are parts of this story that I feel so relevant to current times. The tale of Joseph and Mary having to birth a baby in a pile of hay in some barn because the government ordered them to participate in a census which required them to travel a great distance. The immigrant couple looking for shelter in their greatest time of need, hoping that everything will be okay, just like us as a people now. We in all parts of humanity need to feel that everything will be okay. We need to be like those shepherds in the Bible. These dudes were like, okay, sure, fine. Let's go see what they're talking about. But I think maybe that's the Christmas spirit I'm looking for. The spirit that in the face of terror and confusion, I'm walking into it. I am able to see if possibility as well as a sense of wonder could also be on the horizon. The spirit that the 9-year-old inside of me is willing to be amazed and curious and brave enough to say, let's go see, even when we don't know the road. I'm going to remind us of what Dr. Burton said here a mere month ago. We have to live as ancestors now. Let's live the life we want the generations 6 and 7 down the line to be talking about, carrying on traditions and creating memories. That's my everyday heaven. And today I want to share with you a poem that was offered on December 17th, 2017 at All Souls Church Unitarian in Washington, D.C., and it's titled A Christmas Prayer with 7 Words. We remember the Magi, observers of stars, evidence-based seekers who found their way to kneel before a baby. May we too kneel before life's intricate mysteries, following the path of science-based searchers for truth. We remember Mary, birth mother of a revolutionary prophet, the fetus in her womb a surprise, her choice a decision to magnify her hope. The birth was difficult, attended by a beautiful diversity of animals and a ragtag gathering of vulnerable people. May we too kneel at the cradle of Earth's dreams for peace and dedicate ourselves to revolutionary love. We remember Joseph, unexpectant father, who embraced the baby as his own, believing that every child has a God-given entitlement to love and care. May we too stand by the women and children of this world when patriarchal privilege and power threaten their freedom and put their well-being at risk. We remember the angels singing in a cold night to the overtaxed poor, promising peace and goodwill to all. May we echo their song in acts of solidarity and justice for all souls, refugee souls, green souls, disabled souls, Black souls, young souls, transgender souls. May we join the bold, holy movement to bring heaven to earth. May the morning star brighten our hope for a new day, and may laughter strengthen all our prayers. This season we are in, I am clinging to this poem and my reflection on all these memories, all the goodness and experiences I've had. I'm putting up the tree and hoping to add a new one in the big garage window, and my gnomes have already made appearance. I'll bake treat bags for my neighbors as usual, as always, hoping some of the kids may drop in, but understand they all live so far away and have kids of their own. I am folding all of this with my family food traditions of the recipe for pecan pie, or how I've taken my mother's cornbread dressing that began with stovetop stuffing and modernized it with homemade ingredients. I will be that 9-year-old, but I will also be that ancestor I have to become. Happy, joyful, but strong in my convictions. Please, everyone, have a wonder-filled season. All who can see me and hear my voice deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. Does anyone have a comment or question for still cool Uncle Mel? Ted.
Um, Thank you. That was wonderful as always, the whole story. I want to just comment on the truce story. Most people probably have heard of it. I'm not sure, but if you haven't, our neighbor John McCutcheon, who is a internationally known singer-songwriter and has a cabin in Cherry Log, wrote a song about it called Christmas in the Trenches. And so you go to YouTube and look for it. You'll get a tear in your eye. And I also just Googled and I knew there's like several different films just about that story. But what I wanted to say about it is you get a tear in your eye hearing about it, but the real tears should come because they went back to fighting and killing each other after this truce. And there wasn't a truce the next year, and there hasn't been a truce in other times that I'm aware of. So that's the sad part.
Yeah, Ted Weir. And Mal, that was great. You talk about we led in a lot of ways, we led parallel lives with our families and so forth. And you talked about Frosty the Snowman and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer brings back Burr Alive, you know? And we watched it, what, night before last? And I said, oh my God, Trump is not going to be able